Live right now. And hi, everyone. For everybody that's attending, we're going to get started in a few minutes just as people will start arriving. But welcome, first of all, and feel free to start entering your questions in the chat. So if you clicked on the link, you should be on YouTube. This is a live, unlisted event. It's exclusively for all access pass holders. And you can just start adding your questions into the YouTube chat. And then I will see them here on my side. And then I can read them off to Ed and we can definitely get started. So feel free to um, start submitting them right away. And maybe while people are entering their questions, did you want to give us a little bit of a background about yourself, your areas of expertise? You've got a full-blown practice that you run as well, and I'm sure there are certain areas that you're known for and that you guys specialize in. So maybe give us a bit of a rundown as we wait for all the attendees to arrive and start typing in their questions.
Right. Okay. So thanks for having me, Cornell. It's cool. Always fun to be here. So so I'm a fee-for-service financial planner and tax accountant. Yes, we would practice with this four of us financial planners all on one team, looking after all of our clients. So I was an accountant years ago, working as an accountant. I'm not working as one, but I switched over to financial planner about 30 years ago because I wanted to be able to help people instead of companies. And then we eventually grew, and we started hiring planners. So the big difference I think that built us up initially was just doing financial plans, and we've gotten better and better over the year. And what I find is the investment industry it's all about investments. They don't actually do the in-depth planning. So the main thing that we actually do is write very detailed financial plans. So we'll sit down with you and figure out what you're trying to accomplish in your life. We have very flexible software. We call it interactive financial planning. So we can actually go through many different scenarios, find out exactly when you want to retire, what lifestyle, and what's the best way to get there. So that in-depth planning is the main thing that we're known for. But we also got into quite a few leverage strategies. Like we're the experts in Canada on the Smith maneuver, and a few other leverage strategies. And we just find, because we get a lot of growth-oriented clients, and that's just an excellent borrowing to invest can be a really great way it's probably the best way to grow your wealth faster over time. So, but as an accountant, we also have I'm not working as an accountant, but we have all the tax knowledge to make sure we make everything as efficient as possible on your taxes. And so we have a fair number of business clients there as well. And that's part of one of these talks that we had, is we're able to help business clients with corporations and get into the complicated tax situations and advise them, even talk to their accountants if we want to make sure things work out. So those are kind of the big areas of specialty that we have.
Awesome. And I see here we received our first question from Cassandra, so we can tackle that. And just if anybody, we have a whole bunch of people just joining in right now as we speak. And so in case you missed my earlier announcement, you should be seeing this in YouTube. It's a live unlisted private event. In the there is a chat window that you should see, and in there you can start submitting your questions like Cassandra just did. So let's start with Cassandra's question here. I have heard that as a parent you can set up an in-trust trading account for your minor child. What are the tax implications of this? I'm assuming it would be a non-registered account.
Yes. So an in-trust account, so it's non-registered account, and it would be in your name and the parent's name, one or both parents, in trust for the child. That's the name that you put on the account. We call it ITF, so in trust for. Okay, and you can invest however you want. Now, the reason this started out is because if your minor child, if they're under 18, you can't actually buy an investment account in their name, so it has to be in the parent's name. And then you can technically, this is considered the kid's money, but the truth is you control it. You control it, and they can't take money out until you give it to them. So the tax implications are that capital gains are taxed to the child, and interest and dividends are taxed to the parent. Okay, so that's important. When you're doing this kind of thing, you specifically want to invest to get capital gains, because your kids are probably not working, so it's probably tax-free if you get capital gains. But if you get a dividend or interest, it's added to your income at your tax bracket, so that wouldn't be friendly. So a lot of people use these instead of or in addition to RESPs. So now RESP is generally better for education savings because you get the extra, you get the 20% free money from the government, and then you can essentially avoid tax if you plan taking it out, while the kids are in university. The ITF accounts are good for saving for other things. Like if you're saving to help them with a down payment or a get started in life fund or something, it's much better for something like that. RESP has certain rules around taking money out. The ITF, you can have it as long as you want, and you can keep control of it. I think some parents do it even for kids that aren't able to handle money for whatever reason on their own. It's a way you can still invest for your kids, and yet you control it. So yeah, they can be useful in certain situations.
Mhm. Awesome. Thanks, Cassandra. And yeah, if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to write that in. And I misspoke earlier. I might have said to add into the comments. It's not actually technically YouTube comments. It's a chat window that you will see within the talk. So if you're looking at in a browser, it would be on your right-hand side. There's the chat window there. And if you are on your phone, you actually have to click. There's a little chat button at the top that you would have to click to have the chat window show up. And then there you can start asking your questions. And I do have a follow-up question here from Cassandra while we're on the subject. She asks, one sec, let me just flip to that right now. Does it transfer to their name when they turn 18?
It can, it's up to you as the parent. You control the account. So once they turn 18, you can transfer to their name. In fact, you can even start putting it in TFSA if you want. But they can't necessarily take it because it's still in your name and you have to sign for it. Now, technically, I had a lawyer tell me that if a child actually sued the parent over it, they could demand the money, and it is their money, so they would probably win that. The truth is, though, no child has ever been that ungrateful and sued the parent. So this has never been tested in court. So in reality, you as the parent can control that account as long as you want to. And most of the time, you probably don't want to put it in the child's name when they're 18. You can wait and do it when you feel they're responsible enough to be able to handle it.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Thanks, Ed. And as well, for everybody attending right now, I'm assuming our audio and everything is working well just because we are having the questions roll in now. I see them. So I assume everything is good and you can hear us well. But if for whatever reason, one of us is too quiet, too loud, or there's some sort of interference, anything at all, let me know from the IT side. I'll be managing that whole piece while Ed focuses on the question. So maybe let me know if everything is good on your end, just so that I have that peace of mind. And if there is an issue, please let me know. And while you're doing that, I will move on to the next question. And thank you, Cassandra, for your questions there. The next question I have is from Dan Brown. Dan asks, what impacts, if any, does high inflation have on the retirement plans you are creating today? How are the plans created today different from 2+ years ago, given the high inflation we are experiencing?
Wonder if this is Dan Brown, the famous author.
That's right.
Right. Okay. So the truth is, in a retirement plan, we haven't actually changed what we're doing, and the reason is the inflation we put in the retirement plan is the average inflation we expect over the long term. And actually, even despite what's going on today, we haven't actually changed our long-term expectation. So like if you go back a year, like for a couple of years, we actually had inflation, like it was basically zero, right? Between 0 and 1, it was nothing. And now it's whatever, 8%. But we do expect it to come down in a year or two, and probably eventually get down to the 2 to 3% range. So we use 3% mostly in our financial plans, and this is a specific reason to use something else. But 3%, and the reason is the Bank of Canada is committed to keeping inflation between 1 and 3. So we're pretty sure, and they have tools, and that's basically the only thing that they do. So they've been able to keep it down to, it was basically 2% flattened since the early 1990s. So they were actually quite good at it. So we still think they'll get it down to there. I know the FPSC, the Financial Planners Institute, recommends using 2, which is the middle of the range, 2%. But I find it's more likely that we have times above. Inflation has usually been higher than that. So I think 2% is actually just way too low. We use 3. We're trying to be at the high end of the range to be more conservative, and it's actually really important. Like if you look at compare the difference of 2% versus 3%, it's actually a huge difference in the long term plan. You'd be shocked at how much difference it makes. So I think my kind of skeptical way of looking at it is I think a lot of financial planners don't do much planning and then or invest really conservatively. And what happens is they need to use 2% because if they use 3, the plan would never work. Right? Because they're investing in, a 60-40, like a balanced fund that's, that's going to make 5% a year. And if they use 3% inflation, they just never make it to their plan. So, but if they use 2%, then they can be able to make it. So, but I think 3%, we still think we're still using that as a number. I think it's gives us a margin of safety. And the long-term average since 1950 has averaged a little over 4. So, but we think that the government should be between 2 and 3, average over the next few decades.
So Ed, when you do annual reviews with your clients where you take their current investment portfolio accounts and anything else and you update them in your financial planning software, it sounds like the inflation figure is not something that you update on an annual basis unless the sort of projections from the governing body recommend something else. But typically it sounds like you're doing that 2 or 3% to have that bit of a cushion, but then you update the other figures like their current portfolio size. Is that accurate to say?
Yes, that's basically accurate. I mean, there is a governing body, but they don't tell us what to do. They give us their
Suggestions.
recommendations.
Yeah.
They give us a suggestion. To me, I'm the planner. We're going to make what we think is the best, the most effective decision.
Right. And that's the Financial Planning Standards Council in Canada. Is that right?
Yes, they're the ones
Right.
that have the CFP designation, which is the main financial planning designation.
Gotcha.
But I think 2 is too low. It's most of the time you want it around 2. It tends to average above that. So it's better to be, 2 is the very aggressive approach that, we hope it stays down there. 3 is the more conservative one. So so we're doing annual review. We still expect over the next 30 years for it to average less than 3. So we don't necessarily change it. So we might, if it was a shorter period of time, because inflation is clearly going to be high for the next year. But probably not. Our best thinking right now is it's not going to be, it's not going to be high over the next several decades.
One thing I'll mention too, just as a helpful resource to everyone watching this, we mentioned how they come up with that sort of inflation number that they suggest financial planners use. And then, of course, they're able to use whatever they want based on their discretion. Like Ed was saying, the other thing that they publish annually and that they update annually is the expected returns, like for bonds, for equities, that kind of a thing. And so just that is something that's available for free publicly. So you are able to get that information yourself as well. If let's say you're a DIYer and you have a spreadsheet and you're trying to crunch some numbers yourself, that can be, I think, helpful just to give you maybe a starting point, since obviously there's quite a few smart people working on coming up with that number. Would you agree with that, Ed?
Well, to be honest with you, I look at those numbers all the time, but I find them to be really weird because I was figuring they're in fantasy land on what they expect bonds to be, and they're so super conservative on stocks. Like they have numbers between like 6.5% for stocks as a long-term average. Well, I mean, they average 10, 11%. Like they're saying 6.5% before fees. So they're down to really low, and yet they're saying I think it was like 4 something for bonds. I think so it's like, and they were even saying this, a year ago when rates were really low. So it seems to me that there is an effort on their part to, to have financial planners invest really conservatively and overweight bonds and underweight stocks. But to me, is what they're putting there is not realistic. It's not based on what stocks and bonds are actually expected to make going forward. At least we want a somewhat conservative number, right? And they're in the high end for bonds and really in the low end for stocks.
Yeah, I definitely have noticed that on the equity side. I was very surprised to see the numbers they use, because if you do research from other sources and you look at the historical data, it does tend to be higher. So they clearly have some assumptions in play, it seems, that they put in for
Yeah,
definitely for the equity side. And then of course we've had the bond thing go down quite significantly. So that also is a pretty interesting thing as well.
yeah.
The-
Now bonds are now bonds actually pay higher amount, but that'll probably come down a little bit. So,
yeah.
but I mean, I've actually got stock market history for the last I have 200 years of history of it. So we actually looked through it, and to me, the modern the modern stock market started like late 20s, around 1930s, when they got into manufacturing, and before that it was mostly agricultural stuff. So that's when we got into the modern stock market, and from then till now, if you take the index we have the best feature which figures for is S&P 500. The worst 25-year calendar period was a gain of 8% a year.
Mhm.
So to me, an 8 is a fairly conservative number, as in we're not guaranteed to get it, but you're almost like a very high chance. Let's say 98%, 99%, you should make more than that, even if it's a bad 25 years.
Mhm.
So I think that's you don't want to go ridiculously low. That it's because the problem with taking a low number like 6.5, then what happens is the client has to put an extra 10,000 per year into their plan to achieve the same goal. And I don't really think it's necessary to put that much in, because we can also, most of our clients are working with us full service, and they have our portfolio managers, and so they've actually been outperforming the indexes even after fees. So we're expecting that you don't have to plan based on 6.5. We're pretty sure that we can get more, even if it's a lousy time.
Gotcha. All right, sounds good. And let's move on to the next question here. This one is from Brenda. She asks, say that RSP contribution room has been used up and one's 2022 income is enough to get the 2023 max RRSP amount. Can a T1213 be filed now for 2023 based on expected RRSP room and contributions in 2023?
I think that the T1213, that's the form to have less tax withheld, I believe. Is that right? Is that what?
I don't remember.
Let me just confirm that.
I wish my memory was that good. I can quickly look that up.
Here. I just want to make sure I have the right form.
Sure.
I think I know which one it is. But
And while Ed's looking that up, thanks for everybody for confirming that the sound is good. Looks like things are working well.
yes, it's 12 is to reduce tax at source. So it's an annual form that you file with you send to Revenue Canada, you get approved, and you give it to your employer so they withhold less tax. Okay, so you can do that. So you can request that every year. It's kind of a pain to be able to do that every year. They do have, the other way to do it is there is a TD1 form that your employer gives you. Sometimes you can just put something else in there to approximate the same deduction level, and it doesn't get you or the employer in trouble as long as you actually don't owe money. So you're telling them to withhold less tax during the year. If at the end of the year you do your tax return and you don't owe money, then everything's fine. But if you tell them to withhold less tax and then you owe a whole bunch of money, let's say more than 3,000 on your tax return the year the following, it can get you in trouble. So, and possibly even get the CRA looking at your employer. So I mentioned that I've answered kind of 2 will be filed now for 1213 based on expected RSP room and contribution. Yeah, so usually it's doing close to the end of the year. But so yes, the answer to that is yes, you can file that and request for a regular amount. Now, usually what they're looking for is not necessarily a lump sum. They're looking for a sign that you're contributing monthly. So on the 1213, they're looking for some evidence, and the best way to do it is to sign up for a monthly contribution, and then show the form for that you're putting it in, over the year. So as opposed to you're going to put in a lump sum at one point during the year, then what evidence do you give of that?
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Ed. I was just looking up while you were speaking. We had a couple people attending who were asking about where they can find that information, those inflation assumptions, returns assumptions from the Financial Planners Standards Council. And so I believe I have found it. I was just looking that up. So I'm going to put that into the chat here, and hopefully everybody can see it. And can you maybe take a look at that as well, just to make sure? I just found it seconds ago while you were speaking. This appears to be it, but if you could just take a quick look just to make sure as well. And then that way we know we're referring everyone to the correct resource. Let's take a look
Let me
here.
just go. Yeah, let me just go to that site and just make sure that's because I get
So
them.
it's FP Canada is the site. It's fpcanada.ca. It's the actual organization, the governing body, so to speak. But then I was actually trying to find the exact PDF, which I believe I have found at that link.
That link has got a professional toolkit, and that's not where the that isn't the actual form. Yeah, it is.
Oh no, I'm not referring to the form, Ed. I'm talking about the assumptions for what FP Canada thinks inflation's going to be, to use what they think
Yes,
equity
but
growth.
they have what you've put in there is a practice toolkit, but that's not the assumptions. The assumptions are somewhere else.
Okay, give me one sec here, because I'm able to see it. So add that link at the very. Oh, you know what? So when I put that in, it jumped to number 7, and number 7, it's 2022 projection assumption guidelines. So it's actually not at the very top of the page. If you go to that link, it should take you there's a whole bunch of them listed. Number 8 is the one I'm referring to, and you can click on Peg English. Here, let me just. I'm just gonna send everyone the PDF. Sorry, let me. There we go. Here's another link. And now that one should take you to the actual PDF I'm referring to.
That is one. Canada. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. My suggestion there is don't use the inflation assumption that they use, and don't use the rate of returns that they use. However, the life expectancy tables are very good.
Okay.
And that one, we use that in the financial plan. Like it actually shows you, like, so if you're a couple, age 60 of average health, how long are you expected to live? And they give you, the 10, 20, 30, 40, 50%. What are your odds that one or both of you will live to a certain age? And that's why, it's funny, because most couples, even if you're 20s and 30s, or if you're 50s and 60s and 70s, the odds of whichever one you lives longest will generally live to about 94, 95. And when we plan, we're usually trying to plan for how long either one of you will be around, not when the first one dies, but when the second one dies. So that's a 50% chance that one of you makes it to 94. Well, we don't want to have a 50% chance that you run out of money. So that's why we tend to plan to age 100. And that's for, I think, most couples, you've got like a 15, 20%, 10 to 20% chance that one of you makes it to age 100. So I think I find people sometimes want to plan for a shorter life expectancy. And unless you have significant health, like you and your spouse both have significant health problems, it's safer to plan a little bit longer.
Sounds good. All right, I'm just moving on to the next one. Hopefully that answered the question sufficiently. If not, again, feel free to submit a follow-up. The next question here is from, I don't want to mispronounce your name, Morema. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. Thanks, Dan, for asking that question. Me and husband are in the situation that he will retire next summer, and inflation is a new parameter to add in the equation. Okay, so that was just some feedback there.
Yeah, it's always been a parameter. I find I used to see some people online sometimes doing their own plan and then put figures out to show it. And I just realized their figures are fine, except they missed inflation.
Right.
Well, inflation, the cost of living doubles every 25 years. And if you live 40 more years, it's going to triple, right? So that's a huge factor in you got to include it in a long-term plan.
Yeah. You can just put a spreadsheet. Okay, here's my portfolio size times, let's say, 1.08% every year, and then just here's what I'll have. You got to factor in the inflation, like you said, right?
Your cost of living is going to go up and up and up. So that's why sometimes seniors complain about being on a fixed income, and that's the problem. If they didn't plan for, expenses are going to rise every year.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Brenda asks, do you yourself use a financial advisor or are you strictly DIY? Is that a question for me, Brenda? Because Ed uses himself, I imagine, for his financial planning needs.
Interestingly, there were some articles years ago that a financial planner should use some other financial planner for their financial plan
Mm-hmm.
to
Or
get
just to
input,
get a second opinion,
to get
someone that's
a
not so close to it, no
yeah.
personal
So,
attachment, that kind of thing.
to be honest with you, I find it very difficult to find other financial planners that do this kind of in-depth planning. You'd be surprised at how few there are.
Mm-hmm.
So in our case, we have a team. So there's four of us financial planners. They're all CFPs that we all we're doing, and so we work on our clients all together as a team. And because of that, I get input regularly on financial planning methods and all that kind of stuff from everybody. So I do my own plan, but I get lots of input on the process and the methods and all that.
That's good.
So
Yeah.
and the one other thing I should say from there is what I do is actually the same as what we recommend for our clients. So I have a financial plan that is similar with the same assumptions. I have basically I have all the same investments that most of our clients have. It's what I think we are the most effective ones. We have a portfolio manager that has what I think is really exceptional investments, and then we recommend the same ones for our clients.
Gotcha. Sounds good. And then in case that was for me, I'm basically DIY, but then I will touch base with fee-for-service financial planners to get a second opinion, make sure I'm not missing anything, that kind of a thing. That's been my approach. So Ed's helped me many, many times, especially if there's something complex, especially when it comes to the financial planning and tax side, since he's one of the few financial planners that's also very much an accountant too. And so that is a relatively a more rare thing, I would say, in the space, because a lot of times it's like someone's an accountant or their financial planner. Fortunately, Ed is both, and so I find for usually if there's something that's pretty advanced and complicated, Ed's definitely typically the first person I call about that kind of a thing, just to get a second opinion from somebody that is an expert in the field. And like no matter how much I learn about this, I find it's impossible to know everything. And because you're so close to it and it's your money and it's what you've earned and saved over the years, it's nice to have another perspective from someone that isn't as close to it, just in case, because the stakes are pretty high. You don't want to mess it up. And so I find this is one of those areas where it makes sense to have a second opinion. So that's been traditionally my approach. Yeah. So in case that was a question for me as well, that's basically my answer. All right. Our next question is: given the overwhelming popularity of passive indexing strategy these days, do you see this as an issue as far as future returns go?
Oh, that's as if that would affect the market. Well,
Maybe
actually,
like overinflating the prices of, let's say, the bigger companies, because people tend to just sort of almost like buy those blindly because they're just buying the index as a whole, or at least like, S&P. Some people just do like S&P 500 for US equities, for example. So it's like, could that be messing with the market a little bit, since there's so many people increasing the valuation of those companies by just pumping so much money into those, for instance? I think that's where we're getting at.
It's interesting because I had a read article years ago where the guy says, well, passive indexing works to the extent that people believe it doesn't. You know what I mean? Because if lots of people sort of buy into it, then it works. But if too many people buy into it, then those stocks get inflated, and then passive indexing will work less, right? Mm-hmm. So I've heard that kind of article. It's that kind of logic. I don't necessarily see that's a problem, because the market is actually pretty efficient. And, like, we're in the blog world. We talk to a lot of, regular people, and also a lot of bloggers, and a lot of like people that are answering on blogs. And it's the, I guess, that whole community, the DIY community, surprisingly, as a percentage of the market, is actually pretty small. It's, I don't know, 5 or 10% of the market. It's actually quite a small piece. So now professionals are using, ETFs and indexes much more, but they tend not to use the broad ones. They tend to use sector ones, and they use them for market timing, and it's kind of different. But then, it's most of the market is, all those professionals buying companies, and they still value them based on whatever, their own risk return and how they value them. So in the end, the main part of the market would still, I think, value companies effectively. So I don't really see that. I don't
Mhm.
really see that being an issue.
So from what you've seen, Ed, it's been that it's the institutional investors that are still the majority of sort of where the buying and selling takes place, and so it's not like these DIYers are enough to sway the market if a majority of them are now doing index investing. Would that be fair to say from what you've seen?
Yeah, they can sway,
Okay.
a specific company, right? So, but not the market, not and especially not the really big
Right.
company. They tend to trade based on what the bulk of the investors think they're worth. That's what companies tend to trade for, right? So,
Mhm. For sure.
so
And there's just a follow-up question as well, from the same person. Can it potentially mean that we're getting into a time when active investing will outperform?
Um, well, see, I don't think that alone is going to change what it is. There's always been the two of them, and um, in general, indexing outperforms most of the active investors, but there are a certain number of active and top fund managers and top active investors that do outperform over time. And it's like any field. It's the some are skilled and can outperform. And actually, interestingly, the reason most of them lag, I think, is actually not necessarily lack of skill. It's all about marketing and being more conservative. You know what I mean? So it's most professional investors are trying to provide reasonable returns with less risk. They're not actually trying to beat the index. So I find, like, when I talk to the professional investors, the ones that actually specifically try to beat the index, which is probably only 10 or 20% of them, out of those, probably most of them do. So, but most of them don't even try because they're worried about the compliance, and they don't want to have their investments go down and lose a client. So they're not. Most of them aren't even trying to beat the index. So, but for us, it's actually, this has been an interesting conversation between you and I, Cornell, right? Because you've been a past investor. I'm not. I have never had an index fund or ETF of any type, and I never will,
Mhm.
because I'm we know how to find these really exceptional fund managers and what to look for, and we've got a few that have long-term track records beating the indexes after all fees, and we're convinced it's skill. So my personal investments, I've got nothing in indexing. We're always trying to beat the index, not lag the index.
Mhm.
But I don't think that more people buying ETFs or indexing is going to change how it's. I think it's the same as it was before.
Mhm. For sure. Yeah, I think that's one of the few areas that you and I differ in, Ed, is where you are still pro passive, or sorry, proactive, whereas I'm just a purist index investor. But I think apart from that, we seem to be aligned on just about everything. So,
I think that difference is also a bit of difference in what we do. So we work with kind of our own clients that are working with us, and we can recommend these top fund managers. You're working with kind of with the public, right? So, and it's not that easy to identify who all these top fund managers are.
Mhm.
So it'd be hard for you to tell people this is what to look for and here's how you identify top fund managers. And right, but it's easy for you to say take an S&P 500 or MSCI World Index. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So it, I think we're working with different groups of people. I think that's probably why it.
That's true. There is some personal preference in there for sure, because yeah, there are definitely the investors that are very active. There's the ones that are more kind of hybrid, where they might have their core portfolio, but then they like to alter their positions a little bit to to be more in certain areas or certain industries or things like that. So there's different types of investors, I would say. And I don't know, to me, I found the index investing is just a really good fit because it's fast, efficient. I don't have to worry about it. It doesn't stress me out, because a lot of it's psychological too, right? I don't get any anxiety when the markets fell 15%, over the past
Yeah,
year, right? Like, the anxiety I got from that was zero. Whereas I know for a fact, if I was an active investor and I saw my investments fall by that much, I would be wondering, oh, well, am I holding the right ones? Am I not? Did I pick correctly? Should I change? Did some fundamental
yeah,
things change? You know what I mean? And it gets into the soul. And if you enjoy playing that game, then okay, then fine, play the game. But
yeah.
yeah, I find for me, as a personal preference, I would rather just say, okay, it's in indexes and I'm done. Now I can live my life and do other things. But again, it's a very much a personal thing, right? Some people just love that part and love researching it and love being active. And I mean, to each his own. So
Yeah, I can
yeah.
understand that from your point of view. It's being comfortable with your own process. So for me, actually, when the market's down, I'd had zero worry as well because it's managed by a portfolio manager and all these top fund managers, and I know they're all super smart and whatever needs to be done, they're doing it.
Mhm.
So I have more confidence because I have these experts in there,
Right.
and I'm not market timing them. We tend to, I guess our portfolio manager has actually done not that many transactions with it. We're trying to find the world's best investors. And if you think of it like an all-star team, and in hockey, you're trying to make an all-star team, you wouldn't be changing players every game. If you had an all-star team that played all the time, you'd mostly have the same players most of the year, and then every once in a while you'd change one or something, right? That's when you think somebody else is better than the one that you have.
Mhm.
We've been working with this portfolio manager for 4 years, and basically he's changed like one a year. So we're mostly sticking with the same fund managers over time, and we know them really well, and we have this confidence with them.
Gotcha. Yeah, a lot of it I think is, what are you confident with? What's going to reduce your anxiety? What's going to make you not panic sell when we have the next
Yeah,
2008 happen one day,
exactly.
right?
Yeah,
That seems so important because if
that's
you sell at the
exactly it.
bottom, it's all for nothing anyway.
That's exactly it. So you know what? When people have an investment and it goes down and they sell it, to me, then they should never have had that investment.
Right.
Like any investment that you would have that you would sell only because it goes down, then you're not confident in that investment. So to me, is the investments I have, and I think you feel the same way, I'm totally confident in them. So if they go down, I want to put in more. And people have asked me, well, how far would it have to go down? And you wouldn't. And there is no limit. Like if it fell 30%, if it fell 50%, if it fell 90%, I would put every penny I had into them because I'm just completely confident in this. Right? It's
Yeah,
it's you whatever investment you have, you need to be confident in it as a long-term hold, so that when it goes down, you could put in more. And that's actually it's an easy way to outperform the market, right? Easy way to outperform the market is when it goes down, you put extra in,
Mhm.
and right when it's really strong, you put a bit less in, and if you do that, then you're going to outperform the market over time,
For sure.
right? So you
Yeah,
need
that's what
that.
I've been doing. Once it got to, was it 20% down at one point this year? I was raiding my PayPal accounts. I need extra cash in some accounts, just trying to pump those in as much as possible. Because I remember the blog post you wrote, and that was a really nice call to action. The title was something like stocks are on sale, like 20% off. Do
Yeah,
you know which one I'm talking about? The blog post you wrote? Yeah,
yeah,
and I remember that, seeing that, like it's a good reminder. Okay, if you've been looking for a sale, like
yeah.
20% down, that's a sale in the stock market world. So yeah, if you've got some just cash sitting in some PayPal account doing nothing, okay, now's the time to motivate yourself to move that and actually start investing it.
Yeah, I
That
think
was very helpful.
a lot of investors are looking short term. It's going down. They're thinking, what's going to happen next? Well, I don't know what's going to happen next either, but I do know it will recover. So I don't know when it will recover, but I do know that it will recover. And if you've got that long term perspective, oh, I'm getting in 20% lower. I don't really care if it goes lower, because if it goes lower, it'll come back as well.
Mhm.
To me, the worry when the market is down is that it will recover before I get my money in,
Yeah.
because that's probably not going to come back down again. So
Mhm.
yeah, you know what when the market was down, I had this article about the big deduction. What I went out and did is I took out a big investment loan. Let's borrow a whole bunch more and stick it in now while the market's low.
That's taking it that extra level, right?
I take it to that extra level. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, I know. I've got this. So quite a few of our clients are kind of like me, like these really high growth people, and we're always looking for how to maximize everything. Not nearly all our clients are that way, but that's the kind of person that I am. So when we have these really high growth people, we're the best fit for them. But
Yeah.
but it's kind of fun when you do it that way.
You definitely attract a special type of client, right? Someone that's okay being very high equities, even possibly being willing to use leverage as well, right? In these situations, like you
A
said.
lot of our clients do, not nearly all. Like most people come to us because they want to plan. They don't know what to do with their life. How much should they be putting away, and how do they know when they're going to retire? What lifestyle? How do they plan effectively, and how do they do the taxes? That's why most people come to us. But you're right. We do get quite a few of these people that are looking for like the bulk of our full service clients are 100% equities, and quite a lot of them leverage.
Mhm.
And if you're really, a growth oriented person, it can be, that is the most effective way to be if you can be that way long term.
Mhm. All right, let's move on to the next one here. Now, this one, I think there is a typo here because I think she's referring to a RIF. Not, so yeah, I'll read it though, and I'll try to kind of paraphrase to correct it. When you elect the minimum on your RIF and the government takes that out at the end of the year, can you take out more over and above the minimum? And Ed, while you're answering that, what I'll do is, because you were talking about your practice a bit and the clients you work with, I'll add a little link to the page here. So if people, I know you have the free sort of 30-minute consultation if somebody is interested in potentially working with you. So I want to give you the opportunity to mention that in case somebody thinks they could be a good fit for working with you and your firm. So as you tackle this one about the minimum RIF withdraws, I'll put that up as well for anybody interested that wants to take advantage of the 30-minute consultation piece that you offer.
Right. Okay. So a RIF. Oops. The question just be The RIF is RRIF. Basically, a RIF is the same as an RSP, except that you cannot put money in, and you're required to take out at least the minimum amount every year. But there's no maximum. You can take any amount you want. So you sign up for the minimum, and you can take it automatically every month, or by the end of the year, you have to take out the minimum. But you can take out a higher amount if you want. So, I mean, if you take a higher amount, you should take it in your plan. Like, if you take too much of it, then you're going to run out of money, and what happens then? So you should have a plan for how you take it out.
Right.
The difference is there's a version of the RIF called the LIF, LIF, which is basically a locked-in RSP. Life Income Fund is what it stands for. But basically, it's a RIF that instead of so RIF is what you transfer your RSP to. A LIF is what you transfer a pension to. Okay, so if you transfer to a pension, now pensions, the LIF does have a maximum. It's a minimum and a maximum. So it starts out at like 4% minimum, 7% maximum or something. And it's not a huge range. And you can choose any number in there, but the maximum isn't that high. So, but yes, the answer to the question there is yes, you can choose to take more if that's what you want. It's all taxable, of course, but.
Yeah. So you want to be careful with that. You don't want to increase it so much to the point where now you jump into the next highest tax bracket, for example, while you could have maybe spread that out a bit so that you're always in the lowest tax bracket year over year.
Yeah.
For sure. And I think too, just to follow up on that, I know this is something that I helped my mother with recently because she was in she had a LIF as well. And I remember I don't know if this is like that with all institutions, but in her case, when you try to increase it, so a lot of these have online portals that you can go and you can say, okay, I want to take out more. The portal would not let you take out more than you are legally allowed to do based on the rules of that LIF. Because I think that I could see that being a follow-up question, like, oh, well, how much can I increase it by if it's in a LIF? And the answer is they kind of have that, at least in my experience, they have that coded in already into the online portal that you're doing all this through. Like in her case, it was TD. And so there is actually limits where they will not let you do that. But obviously, you should know, if you're not sure, you can talk to people that work there and talk to the customer support, and they can tell you what the maximum amount is that you can increase it by every year if it's
you can Google that too. If you Google RIF table, RIF minimum withdrawal table, you see it goes up by based on your age. And if it's a LIF table, then there'll be a minimum and a maximum.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's right.
You can Google the amounts and then you see what it is. And you don't want to take too much, but you still want to take too much out. With RIF, you can take any amount you want, but then it'll get pushed to the higher brackets. You don't want to pay too much tax, and you also don't want to deplete your RIF too soon and be out of money. So, gotcha. Yes, you mentioned. Thanks for the opportunity just to mention about the.
Oh yes, I'll put that back.
So yes, if from listening to this you think that you may be interested in working with us, the best thing to do is just go to our blog. There's a link right here. You can go directly to it, or you go to my blog rempel.com, find the contact us, and you can just fill out a form for a free 30-minute consultation. And so we're not like, I think most people are scared to call financial planners because they're scared to get marketed to. That doesn't happen in our case. We have more than enough clients, and we're actually quite selective on who we work with. We only want to work with people that actually want to have this, want to have proper planning done and have this long-term perspective. So basically, in a phone call, we talk about like, what is it that you're looking for? We'll tell you what we do, and then we can kind of just decide together whether or not we're a fit to work together.
Sounds good. So there's the link, and then yeah, I'll also at rempel.com is the other spot you can
Yeah.
go. Just to,
On my blog, Ed Rempel, there's a services tab. And if you read that, that talks about all the services we do and what our fees are and what our portfolio managers are. And there's actually a link to the free 30-minute consultation at the bottom too. It's all on one page.
awesome. Sounds good. All right, moving on to the next question here from Dan Brown. In most of the retirement literature I've read, there is little mention of creating a retirement budget for medical expenses. How to quantify, given most prescriptions are covered 100% by my employer. So, yeah, this is an interesting one, Ed, because when you look at the US blogs, this is the big fear I've noticed in like the fire community and retirement community in general in the US, because they don't have the Canadian healthcare that that we have here. But you're right, it is still, it's not like everything is always covered. So yeah, how do you factor all that in?
Yeah, like so when we do a retirement plan, like we go through every expense. Like we do a custom retirement lifestyle for every client. We look at every expense. Like, do we expect you're going to still have a mortgage there, and how long, and where are you going to be living? What are the costs, and what are you going to do for lifestyle, and how much you want for travel? We're looking at every area. We're trying to make the lifestyle. What's the lifestyle that you want to have? And medical, we specifically look at what you have. Now, we do get some clients that are government employees, and they will cover they will cover prescriptions all the way through all their medical costs, even after they retire. So then we can pick a very low number. It doesn't cover everything, right? Your benefits doesn't cover everything. It often doesn't cover. It may or may not cover dental or or like bridges, like more expensive dental or whatever it is. It doesn't cover homeopathic, and so there's certain things it covers and some things it doesn't. But yeah, so if you should put in like what's your best estimate of what you actually think it will be, but you got to allow for the fact that as you get older, you'll probably have higher costs, right? So don't like, I would suggest, even for people who have it covered, don't put zero, because there'll be some cost. I find like in Canada, most of our actual retired clients are spending about 2,000 to 3,000 a year in medical costs. So assuming they don't have a plan, what happens? You can buy a medical plan, or you can just pay as you go. And most of the time people find it's cheaper just to pay as you go, and you just kind of allow for it. Now, if you're going to retire outside of Canada, it is a different question. Like if you're in the States, it could be a lot more. If you're on some other countries, it may not be may not be much more. So you have to think about, if you're going to retire someone else, what's the medical going to be over there?
Mm-hmm. So, and when you said a 2,000 to 3,000, Ed, does that include dental as well, or just strictly? Yes. Okay. So 2 to 3.
That's the total. Because remember, in most provinces in Canada, even if the government, like so in Ontario here, we have the OHIP plan. So it actually it's called Trillium, right? So when you're over 65, the government actually picks up most prescription drugs, but there's a deductible. So you pay the first, 1,000 or something, and then it's covering the rest above that. So, and that's not picking up dental. So then you're picking up your deductible for drugs, anything that's not covered in that. Plus you're doing your dental on top and anything else. But that's how we get this kind of 2,000 or 3,000. Is we have quite a few retired clients. I'm just looking, okay, what are they actually spending? So that's just from kind of experience.
Sounds good. All right, next question is, if I buy a house worth 900,000 and after selling the current home end up with a mortgage of 450,000, would it be possible to use the Smith maneuver to pay off the mortgage in less than 10 years?
Well, okay. So the Smith maneuver, the way that it can help you pay off a mortgage more quickly is because you get tax refunds most years, and you can use that to make mortgage prepayments. Okay, I've seen some versions of the Smith maneuver where Smith maneuver for dividends or something, where or there's a Smith-Snyder method which doesn't actually work. But let's say you Smith maneuver where you borrow to invest, you get dividend stocks, and then you use that to pay your mortgage more quickly. But I found that's actually less effective overall. Like, you have to make a higher rate of return to make up for the dividend. You have to pay tax on those dividends every year. And if you just invested more tax efficiently for long-term growth, you pay less. So the Smith maneuver generally, like if you have a 25-year mortgage and you take all your tax refunds and you pay them on the mortgage, it'll take maybe 3 or 4 years off of your mortgage. It doesn't pay it all the way. It doesn't reduce it from 25 years down to 10. It would maybe be 21, 22 years instead of 25. And that's just from putting the tax refunds on it.
That's good. And this is just a follow-up question from D. Grant. Which version of Smith maneuver would you recommend for someone with a relatively high risk tolerance? Would it make more sense to rent the current house to use for Smith maneuver instead?
Well, first of all, they get the relatively high risk tolerance. Relatively is, I'm not sure what they mean by relatively. So, if you're a very high risk tolerance, the most aggressive way is what we call it the Rempel maximum. It's the strategy that we came up with ourselves. So if you're making a mortgage payment, you're paying some principal, right? So let's say you're paying, I don't know, $2,000 a month, and 1,000 is principal, 1,000 is interest. So you're paying 1,000 of principal down a month. So the standard Smith maneuver, I just borrow that 1,000 and I invest it. Okay, but so the Rempel maximum, what we do is we say, okay, we're not going to invest 1,000 a month. We're going to go out and get a big investment loan so that our interest payment is 1,000 a month. Okay, so that's 12,000 a year. So for example, that might be 300,000. So 250 or 300,000, you borrow that to invest. Your interest payment is 1,000 a month, and that's your Smith maneuver. So that's the Rempel maximum strategy. So that's a pretty aggressive strategy. Over time, assuming you can maintain that long time, because the payments may fluctuate a bit, but over time, that's going to grow your wealth much faster than the standard Smith maneuver. But that kind of strategy is, obviously not for everybody. So that's why I say relatively high. If you're very high risk tolerance, that may be the right strategy. If it's relatively high, then, not sure what that means. The second part of the question, I'm not sure if I quite understand that. What it makes sense is to rent the current house to use the Smith maneuver instead. So then if you're going to rent your current house, then where are you living?
I'm guessing they're buying a new house to live in, and then they're
gonna,
using the Smith maneuver on the rental property.
maybe.
So I get that's how I would interpret it.
The general answer is it's most effective to do Smith maneuver on every property you have, whatever properties you have, right? So some people say, well, why would I do it on a rental property? It's already tax deductible. Yes, but okay. So the Smith maneuver, I think there's a misconception because people think it makes your mortgage tax deductible. It doesn't actually make your mortgage tax deductible. What it does is it converts it into a tax deductible credit line or debt down the road. And the same thing, if you have a rental property, you're still paying the mortgage down, hopefully slowly. You should pay them down, rental property down slowly, and home mortgage down fast. But if you're paying it down, you're still getting some principal available that you can still borrow to invest. So you can do Smith maneuver on everyone. In fact, the most we've ever done for one client, we did 7 Smith maneuvers. They had a home, 5 cottages, 5 rental properties, and a cottage, and we just set up 7 Smith maneuvers.
That's a big loan. Loans, plural.
Yes, it wasn't a big investment loan. It's just 7, credit lines. Like it took a little work to get that all set up and flowing.
Yeah. That must have felt good after, though. You've got this. It's like an artist, right? You've got this masterpiece you built, but instead of art, it's Smith maneuvers.
Yes. Once it's running, almost all of it is automated. There's only one part that you have to do manually, right? But getting it all set up and running, all the mortgages in place and monthly amounts transfers, and it takes a while to get it all running. But
yeah, sounds like a kind of challenge you would enjoy, though, Ed.
It is. Yeah, it's fun.
That's your cup of tea, I think. All right, let's take a look at this next one. I think this is more of a comment. Hello, I'm 66 years old as a DIY investor for me and my spouse. They've got their asset allocation there, 85% equity, 15% cash, 40% in non-registered, 60% in register, multi 6 figures. I'm fearful to change to a firm, private wealth, or a broker firm. Okay, so we would need. So this is more of a comment.
Is there more to that question, or that?
He asked a couple other ones, but it's about a specific stock.
Oh, geez.
Oh, another one of those warnings.
Yes. Sorry,
Let's
not a
see
good
here.
time.
Okay, let
Yeah,
me take a
so
look here.
I do get the first part of his question. He's fear
Okay.
like again, it's a bit of what we discussed before. Like, so he's a do-it-yourself investor. He's fearful to switch to somebody, and
Mhm.
the problem is like quite a few of them you might get marketed to, and they may have underperforming. Like, remember, a lot of them underperform because they're trying to be reasonable return with less risk as opposed to what you're doing. So yeah, I do get that it's not an easy change to make. We have had a fair number of clients that did do it yourself and then ended up working through us. Like, so we have do it yourself clients. We just write a financial plan for them, and then they just go off and do it themselves. They have it in writing, they know what they're doing, and they go off and do it themselves. But most of the clients, once they work with us, they see how we work, and they see we've got a really good process, and the investing process is just as good, and then they invest with us as well. So, but I do understand there's a letting go, right? You have, if you're DIY, you have control of it, and actually to let go and have somebody else manage it can be a little scary.
Mhm.
So at some point, though, your investments get large enough that a lot of people want to have a professional looking after it. They're not sure that they're gonna. There's the risk of messing it up,
For sure, and the stakes become higher and higher as the portfolio gets
It gets
larger, for
bigger.
sure.
Yeah.
And then as you
Yeah.
get older, now there's estate planning challenges you need to deal with, and then also the other factor is that when if let's say you pass away before your spouse and you're the DIY investor of the partnership, then now can they actually take all that over? What if it's too complex? There's also
Very
cognitive
important.
decline as people get older sometimes. So yeah, it's I could see that being a case for having a
Yeah.
firm actually help.
Yeah, that's very important. Actually, you see a lot of couples. One person's into finances and likes managing it, like doing investment, but the spouse is not interested at all. So
Mhm.
that if this one passes away and gives it to the spouse, they don't even know what they're doing, right? The spouse wouldn't want to do it on their own.
Right.
So sometimes the knowledgeable person says, you know what, I should find a professional that my spouse will be happy with and be comfortable with, and let's establish the relationship and make sure while I'm here, let's make sure we're happy with the process. So
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like we talk about estate planning and how critical that is in terms of getting things set up properly from a tax perspective and all that, and wills and things of that nature. But I find one thing that's discussed less often is that whole piece about what you just said. One spouse is the money person, the other one is not. And then again, the cognitive decline thing is someone could get dementia or whatever the case. Things don't always go perfect, or everyone is of sound mind all the way up until the second they pass away. So there is that whole challenge as well. So I could see that being almost like a part of that. There's the investment piece, there's the estate planning, and then there's I guess part of the estate planning is also okay, how are you secured in terms of if you're the DIYer in the partnership, who's going to take that over once you're gone if you pass away earlier.
yeah,
Yeah.
we've had clients that are trying to refer their parents to us,
Hmm.
and then the parents already they're starting to get dementia, and they're starting to decline. The question is, sometimes at that point, the question is, how much would the parents understand?
Right.
And sometimes you get to an awkward point of view where like sometimes when you try to get dementia, you get less trusting as well, right? So that they actually wouldn't do it, and they can't really refer them. They could when they're of sound mind, but as they're declining, sometimes it gets harder to refer them until they're far enough that the kids actually are the power of attorney and can make the decision for them.
Hmm.
And then the kids take it over, and then that's when we work actually with the kids on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
But it sounds like one of those things, the earlier you tackle it, the better, as opposed to having to go through that whole
yes.
process, because they could be damaging their portfolio, their wealth, while they're going through that decline as well. And hopefully that's salvageable once
Yeah.
the kids are able to legally take over. Yeah.
Yes, you can make, when you're getting dementia, you can make really bad decisions.
Yeah. Sure. So, so you asked a couple other questions as well. So we'll get to those. Monica asked another one, so I want to get to that one first, and then we can tackle any other ones here as well. So Monica was asking, how does the RIF work?
Right. So a RIF is essentially the same as an RSP, except you cannot contribute, and you're required to take at least a minimum out every year. And the idea is, so the minimum is, let's say, around 4% when you're 65, and it keeps going up. And by the time you're in early 90s, it's 20% a year. So it's kind of the government's way to, we're helping you save for retirement with an RSP, but now we want our money, and, you have to kind of take this out over your life. So it kind of forces it, like it'll probably eventually deplete, because once you're taking 20% out every year, unless you're making awesome returns, it's gonna decline, right? So but you get to choose any amount above the minimum. You decide how much you take out. Normally, you do the conversion. You could do it anytime you want. However, normally you do it when you retire, because like once you take it out, once you convert it, you have to take a minimum out. And if you're working, it's on top of your income and it's taxed at a higher rate. And the concept is RSP is there while you're saving. While you're working, you're investing and saving up for retirement, getting contributions every year. Then when you retire, now I want to stop contributing. I want to start getting money out. And that's when you convert it to a RIF, and you decide how much to take out based on what's the lifestyle you want, and what's an amount that's taxed not too high, and also what's an amount that you can take out and it should last as long as I'm going to last. So you pick kind of a good amount, and then set that up to withdraw it every month. And usually you can set it up to send you money every month, right? So it's like getting a monthly paycheck.
Mm-hmm. And I believe Monica was also the one asking the earlier riff question as well about, can you take out more than that minimum amount at one point? And you mentioned, yes, you can, assuming it's not a lift where there's a certain limit. If you did, mechanically speaking, are you able to take out at a larger portion, let's say this year, because let's say your income's lower, and so you're willing to take out more because it won't bump you up to the next tax bracket, but then in future years you want to kind of go back to that minimum. So are you able to just take out more this year, and that will not automatically set the new default to be the higher number? Or how does it work mechanically when it comes to that?
So the minimum goes up every year, like this is around 4, and it goes up every year. There's a formula for it, and it's based on the January 1st, opening balance. So whatever the balance is. So if you take more out one year, then the balance will be a little bit less, and next year's minimum will be based on the reduced balance. But yes, there is some tax planning. Sometimes if you have just got lots of deductions or something one year, you think, oh, you know what? I can take some money and pay almost no tax on it. Why don't I take a bit more out, put it in my TFSA, right? Let's just take out more this year, because I don't pay much tax on it. And if I leave it till next year, I'll pay more tax.
Very interesting. So if you actually do that, then in the next year, like you said, your balance might now be much lower because you took out more the previous year, because you had a low income year. And so you were able to take out more and still be in the lowest bracket. And now your absolute amount you have to withdraw could actually be now even lower than the previous year, the minimum, because now we're dealing with a smaller balance, and it's calculated as a percentage of your balance as of January 1st. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So for our clients, we're always looking at the tax brackets. So both the ones that are saving up and the ones that are retired, we're looking every year at what's their tax bracket that they're on. So if you make an RSP contribution, are you getting 30% back or 40%? So often we'll tell them it's worth putting X amount in, but not more than that, because then the refund you get would be a smaller percentage. You're better off doing that amount next year. Mm-hmm. And same thing with withdrawal. You could take so much out at 20% tax, but if you take more than that, you're paying 30% tax on it. So that's better to defer that to next year, and then every year, there's different things happening in your life. So you may adjust that every year based on, what other income you have and what tax bracket you're going to be in each year.
For sure. Yeah, I find once you hit retirement, or when you're actually living off your portfolio, it becomes a question of you enter this new game of tax bracket management, right? And can I stay for my spouse and I in the lowest tax bracket? Can we arrange things in such a way to always be in the lowest bracket? It's sort of this almost like rite of passage into retirement, right? Where you now have to think about tax brackets, and can we hit this goal of being in the lowest one all the time?
Yeah, you know what? If you plan effectively, you can have a pretty high income. Like we found, like clients can live off $150,000 a year and all be at the lowest, and sometimes 200. And 200,000, and all be at the lowest 20% bracket. And because first of all, you got to make sure you split it, right? So each person can take 50,000 at the 20% bracket. It's
Right.
Ontario rates, but other provinces are similar. So that's 50 for each one, 50 for the other. And that's the taxable income, right? On top of that, you have, the the TFSA, if you have non-registered, there's the lower tax on the capital gains. And so if you add all that up, you can often have 150,000 a year of income, but you're only paying 20% tax on 50,000 or less.
Mm-hmm.
So it's you made 150,000 before tax, but you're 135 after tax. You didn't pay much tax on all this. So that's
Yeah.
all effective planning.
It is. It is. It is a fun game for sure.
Yeah.
I think that's all for the questions. We did have a few follow-up ones from SO here, but this is regarding a specific stock, it looks like. And I mean, feel free to tackle it if you wanted, but my understanding is, you're not, you don't typically talk about investing in individual stocks, that kind of a thing. But I mean, if you do want to tackle it, feel free. But this sounds like it's beyond the scope, since this is not a stock picking kind of, that's not a thing that you do. Am I correct to say that, or is this something you want to tackle?
Yes, I'm not the investment guy to give you advice on a specific stock.
Yep.
So I wouldn't be. So I can't answer this question. I don't know what's happening with this specific company. So obviously utilities, the utilities, you mostly buy them because they have a higher dividend, but they don't grow much. It's basically just because you're getting the dividend, right? So if interest rates go up, you generally expect your utility stock to go down. So I understand in general why it would go down, but he's saying it went down more. I don't know the story of that particular company.
Yeah. This is more of for if you do have a question about a particular stock. I do recommend attending the Peter Hudson Q&A that we're going to be having later this month. He is the one that actually does look into specific stocks, and he's got a company and he's got analysts on staff that research companies and things of that nature, in particular in the Canadian space. So if you did want have some questions about that, I definitely recommend checking that out. And I know a part of his service to you, they have a Q&A where you can ask questions as well. But I mean, definitely you have the All Access Pass, so I definitely suggest attending that session and saving those sort of stock specific questions there. Ed is more so on the financial planning, tax planning, and optimization side.
Exactly. Peter Hodgson's answer on one specific stock would be way better than my answer. We have a portfolio manager. So for our clients, I would ask that to our portfolio manager, and he would know the answer to that. And he would know, what should you do? Should you wait for it to recover, or does this mean you should get out of it? Right. So
that's good. So that is all that I have for the questions. I'll put up this link here as well for anybody that does want to do a free call with you, just to give you another opportunity, Ed, to speak to some more attendees from the summit. But if anybody does have any last minute questions, feel free to submit them. Otherwise, that's all that I'm seeing on my screen right now. So we'll end the session in a minute if I don't receive any more. Let me just take a quick look at the chat here in case there is another one.
Let me add one other thing. So I have clients that go to our blog and then email me questions about their life. So I can't just answer questions one-on-one with people that aren't clients. So I tell people I answer specific questions for our clients, and I answer them on my blog. Okay. So if you have a question that you think of later on, I should have asked this, go to my blog, find an article on that topic, or there's just a general place where you can ask questions, and just ask your question there. Now, I'm usually a few weeks behind. It may take a little while before I answer it, but I answer every question that's on there. So if you don't get an answer here, you can get a question answered somewhere down the road. And I like doing it on the blog. It's very useful there because other readers can read it as well. So it's not just, I'm just not, answering a question for someone who's not a client, just one-on-one. I get help a lot more people if you put it on the blog and other people can read it.
Sounds good. We do have a few more questions that just came in. Are there any tax strategies for highest bracket earners beyond just vanilla RRSP?
Actually, I mentioned them in my which is it the latest talk? Yeah. So I mean there are a bunch of different tax credits, and if for high income earners, you're right. If you make $500,000 a year, you have $29,000 RSP room. Well, you're gone with that in a minute, right? Now what? What else do you got, right? And you're paying 54% tax on it, so you got to have something else, right? So the problem is, a lot of the there's tax shelters, but most of them are are not that good from the investment side. So you're buying this lousy investment or a sector investment or something. So for the most part, we mostly don't recommend those. You're more often just better off investing effectively and not worrying about that. To be honest with you, the biggest thing for high people in a high bracket is borrowing to invest, and it's miraculous for them. First of all, you qualify for it, right? Secondly, it's you get this big, huge tax deduction, and if you invest effectively, you're getting you borrow $1,000,000, you pay 5% interest, 50,000. Now you just got a 50,000 deduction, and you may have 5 or 10,000 of capital gains to claim against it, but for the most part, you get this big tax deduction every year. You're getting these huge refunds, and that is what works the best. And if you're high net worth, you're thinking of if you're high income, you make a lot of income, you get used to this lifestyle. So when you retire, you probably also want to live on a pretty high lifestyle, right? It's not necessarily like we have clients that make 500,000-600,000 a year. They don't want to retire at 100,000. They want to retire on 350,000, something like that. And then you need a big portfolio to retire. So you have to save a lot of money. So that's borrowing to invest is effective from both the retirement planning and the tax deduction. To me, it's outside of RSP. It is the best tax deduction that a high net worth person can get. Actually, I think I mentioned that in my video that's coming out tomorrow. So.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely check out Ed's YouTube channel. He's been publishing quite frequently, and it's really, really good content.
Every Thursday.
So, yeah, so it's definitely I recommend taking a look at that. I'm really glad you're doing those, Ed. And that's all that I have. So thanks everybody for attending. I hope you found that helpful. Again, you can go on Ed's blog. There he has some really amazing free resources on there, very informative, that you can learn a lot from, if you're more of the DIY investor side. And then here is the link again if you did want to do the consultation with Ed. And yeah, I recommend you check it out. Hopefully you found that useful. My name is Cornell. Check out the Build Wealth Canada podcast if you haven't already. That's my own shameless plug. Ed's been on there multiple times. He's going to be on again in the very near future. We're going to have him on in the new year too. So definitely, if you have some other questions, feel free to send them over to me, and I can ask Ed those questions as well during the episode. It's Build Wealth Canada podcast, and again, edrempel.com is Ed's site. So yeah, thanks for coming. I hope everybody found the session valuable, and I will see you on the next one next week. All right. Anything else you want to say, Ed, or are we good to go to finish this off?
Yeah, we're good. Good. Oh, just thanks for the opportunity. It's always fun doing this, Cornell.
This is I really enjoyed it as well. Yeah. So yeah, hopefully the feeling was everyone attending felt the same way. And we'll see you on the next podcast episode.
Yeah, I'm at a point in my life where I'm just mostly about educating the public. That's why I have the blog and the YouTube channel. It's just I've learned so much over the years. Like we've written over 1,000 financial plans. The truth is, what is it? Less than 3% of financial planners in Canada have written even a single financial plan in their career. I've written well over 1,000 of them. So I just got a lot of insight from experience. And that's what I write about. I'm trying to help people actually learn what actually works.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And I find too, at the very least, even if somebody doesn't become a client of your practice, they do learn some very important questions to ask, whether they're a pure DIY person or whether they go with someone else. At the very least, they will know some critical components to ask. And also, if they already have a planner or advisor, they can sort of do a little quality control to see, okay, are they just giving me some fluff for the high fees? Because you actually have some really good backed up research that you educate people on. So again, thanks again for your contribution. Always fun chatting with you. And I'm looking forward to our episode together, and as well to the YouTube videos that you keep launching. Those are all wonderful. Have a good weekend. And thanks everyone for joining as well. Take care.
Okay. Thanks for now.